Now that Disney have bought out Fox, and now that the 11-year, 22-movie Infinity Saga has come to a close, the X-Men's arrival in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is surely imminent. What better way to kick off a new chapter in the incredibly popular franchise than by introducing a group of characters who all the fans have wanted to see alongside the Avengers on the big screen since day one? But the question of how the X-Men will be introduced remains a mystery. In this video, we'll be going over the theory that none other than Scarlet Witch will be responsible for the X-Men's introduction in the MCU. Let's get to it. So until now in the MCU, the concept of mutants hasn't been so much as mentioned. We thought they might end up being called miracles in the franchise after Baron Strucker spoke of the Age of Miracles in the Captain America the Winter Soldier mid-credits scene back in 2014, which saw the introduction of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, but that wasn't the case, and the idea of Earth-based humans born with superpowers thanks to the X gene still hasn't come to pass. When you consider the fact that the superpowered species are typically depicted as having been around in the Marvel Universe for centuries, shoehorning them into a world that has thus far ignored them completely was always going to be tough. Doing so runs the risk of creating one of two major problems. The first is that if they're presented as having always been there, why hasn't anyone noticed them? How have they hidden themselves away? And why haven't they taken part in any of the major conflicts for Earth's fate that the Avengers have fought in? The second is that if they're created as a new concept, a lot of important X-Men history will get lost, such as the idea that the Celestials created them thousands of years ago, the idea of Apocalypse being the first recorded mutant in ancient Egypt, and Wolverine having fought in various wars. There is a new theory, however, that creates something of a compromise. While it wouldn't give mutants a history spanning several millennia in the MCU, it would bring them into the franchise as an established species. And it's the idea that Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch, will create them, possibly in her upcoming Disney Plus TV series WandaVision.
I mean, it's kind of obvious.
There are, of course, a number of other ways in which they could be introduced, all of which would work, but would undoubtedly irk some fans in various ways. So let's quickly run through some of those.
Whatever point is, things change.
For starters, the events of Avengers Endgame and Avengers Infinity War could be responsible for their arrival in a number of ways. We've seen from the Spider-Man Far From Home trailers that the snap tore a hole in reality. Nick Fury said as much, which resulted in beings from other dimensions pouring in. One of those multiversal beings is Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio, and presumably the elemental villains in the same movie are some of the others. With that in mind, a gateway to a reality in which the X-Men exist could have been opened by the snap, and that could be how the X-Men are introduced into the MCU. That particular way would allow the established Fox franchise actors such as James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, Jennifer Lawrence, and Nicholas Hoult to reprise their roles in the MCU. The other Infinity War and Endgame related way in which they could appear is if the snap sent out a power surge that triggered mutations around the world. But as previously discussed, this would give mutants absolutely no history in the MCU, which would frustrate hardcore fans beyond belief. We could also discover that Hydra successfully created more superpowered beings than we thought in the franchise. We already know they created Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, but if they created others, they could be the original mutants whose introduction to Earth's gene pool creates a new mutated offshoot of humanity going forward in the MCU. However, that would also result in mutants having no history in the franchise, and we'd have to wait for any mutant offspring to be born and grow up, which renders the idea fairly ridiculous. There's also a chance it could be revealed that all memories of mutants have been erased for some reason. To explain, what if it was revealed that humanity had turned on mutants years ago in the MCU, so a character with the power to manipulate minds on a global scale, such as Professor Charles Xavier, had wiped all evidence of mutants existing from the memories of everyone on Earth, allowing them to live amongst humanity as normal individuals. This would suitably explain why they hadn't been acknowledged in the franchise since its inception, but there would be a couple of problems. If they were to suddenly come out of the shadows in the franchise going forward, maybe to assist the existing MCU heroes with a villainous threat, questions would be raised as to why they hadn't done so before. What could possibly be more of a threat than an alien invasion, the rise of an evil robot intent on making humanity extinct, or an evil purple-skinned despot who wants to wipe out half of all life in the universe? Moreover, could we really believe that all the evil mutants would have resisted using their powers to stay hidden? It's unlikely. There is a comic book precedent for this memory-wiping concept, but it didn't involve mutants. The Sentry, the Marvel superhero who's otherwise known as Robert Reynolds, was first introduced to the comics in the year 2000, when it was revealed that he'd always been around, in spite of the fact that nobody remembered him. As it turned out, when his evil alter ego, the Void, emerged, he used his massive telepathic power to wipe the world's memories, including his own, in order to save it. Something similar could happen with the X-Men in the MCU. Oh, and for the record, we'd absolutely love to see the Sentry in Marvel's flagship movie franchise, but that's a topic for a different video. Now, let's get back to that new theory about Scarlet Witch creating the X-Men. We don't really know much about her new TV show yet, mainly because not much has been announced about it. We do know that it will obviously star Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda Maximoff and Paul Bettany as Vision, but nothing about what kind of stories will be told has been made public. That being said, although it wasn't released publicly, some poster art for WandaVision was unveiled at the Disney Plus launch chat, which depicted the superhero couple in a 1950s environment. And that's according to Olsen herself, so it's pretty reliable information. It could just be a fun promo image, or it might mean the show takes influence from the styles and flavors of the decade. But what if it means the titular pair actually time travel to the 1950s in an attempt to live out a normal life? That's where this theory really kicks in.
Great Scott!
It speculates that the unlikely couple's domestic bliss will be shattered when something goes wrong or a traumatic event unfolds. The exact specifics of what that might be are a little sketchy, but the crisis causes Wanda Maximoff to lose control of her powers. At that point, her full reality warping abilities that we know she has in the comic books would be unleashed, the result of which would be the awakening of mutant kind across the globe in the 1950s. As per the time travel logic that was explained in Avengers Endgame, it would create a new timeline in which the X-Men and mutant kind are around in the present day. But what if there was more to it than that? What if Scarlet Witch was so powerful that the unleashing of her full power changed all realities, allowing the X-Men to appear in the main MCU timeline as if they'd always been there? Ever since the character's introduction in that aforementioned mid-credits scene of Captain America the Winter Soldier, when it was revealed that Hydra had given her and her twin brother Pietro powers using the Mind Stone, fans of the MCU have been anticipating something that borrowed from the epic House of M comic book arc. In that story, Scarlet Witch suffered a mental breakdown and attempted to alter reality to recreate her lost children, all of which ultimately led to her uttering the words "no more mutants" and wiping the vast majority of mutant kind from existence. Now that the X-Men's arrival in the MCU is imminent, we wouldn't be surprised if Kevin Feige and company opted to execute a sort of reverse House of M that kind of dipped into the comic storyline, but with the opposite result of Wanda creating mutants rather than destroying them. Elizabeth Olsen has teased that WandaVision will pull from various comic book arcs. It might seem odd to have such a key event happen in a TV show rather than a movie, but it does make sense to have the introduction of the X-Men dependent on a character who is so closely connected to them in the source material. Of course, we're fairly sure Scarlet Witch will appear in an MCU movie or two again in the future, so it wouldn't have to happen on the small screen.
I'm reading the terrain.
When you think about it, it does actually seem as though Marvel Studios have been teasing Scarlet Witch's power in the MCU for a while. Just think about the character's showings in the franchise to date. We've seen how powerful the Infinity Stones were. They literally erased and brought back half of all life in the universe and have been confirmed to have destroyed worlds. And Wanda was arguably the individual who had the most impressive showing against them. When Thanos was wielding 5 of the Infinity Stones in Avengers Infinity War, Scarlet Witch was able to simultaneously hold him back with one energy blast and destroy the Mind Stone in Vision's head with another energy blast. Then in Avengers Endgame, when the Mad Titans forces had invaded Earth and the villain was having a fairly easy time of it against the other heroes, Scarlet Witch was able to use her telekinesis to genuinely hurt him, which even resulted in him calling for Corvus Glaive to use his ship to rain fire on the battlefield, which would have destroyed Thanos' own army as well as his heroic enemies. Nobody else caused the prune-chinned villain to resort to such desperate tactics in the history of the MCU. Could all of that have been on purpose in order to set her up for a power move in the franchise? Was that Marvel Studios saying, yeah, this girl is that powerful? We certainly think so. Given that she's faced off against the most powerful villain in the franchise and come out on top, and gone against the power of multiple Infinity Stones on relatively equal terms, the idea of her creating a new species of characters in the MCU doesn't seem too unrealistic. Wanda seems to get more powerful the more emotional she gets, especially when that emotion is anger or sadness. Given that Vision is set to come back to life for the new TV show, should she lose him again, that might tip her over the edge, and the resulting anger could indeed result in an unbridled show of power power that triggers a mutant gene activation across the globe. However the X-Men are introduced into the MCU, we sure can't wait to see them. It really does seem appropriate that she'd be the one to bring them into the franchise as it enters a new era. For now, there's no scheduled date for a movie involving the X-Men in the MCU, but with WandaVision set to start filming this fall and the franchise's full Phase 4 schedule set to be announced following the release of Spider-Man Far From Home this summer, we could be set for confirmation, or at least a hint at their arrival. So, what do you think of this theory? Will Scarlet Witch create the X-Men in the MCU? If not, who or what will? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and remember to like the video and subscribe to Screenrant for more great content like this. See you next time, guys!